On today's show, we dig into our archives and go back to 2014, where we head to Sydney Motorsport Park and look at all things retro from the inaugural Retro Speedfest. Then we wind back to 2013 and head to Australian motor racing's Holy Grail, Mount Panorama in Bathurst, where we look back on the supports action from the 2013 Bathurst 12 Hour, featuring the rough and tumble action of the HQ Holdens and Geminis and the multi-brand mayhem of improved production. This is Speedweek.
Hello everybody, welcome to Sydney Motorsport Park. And we're checking out some great cars of yesteryear at the Sydney Retro Speedfest. And I think this venue now can definitely claim that it celebrates some of the great historical cars in this country with a number of great events. I've got John Young sitting alongside me. John, we can expect to see a great range of cars today.
Everything from Formula One cars of the 80s through to the Group C, Group A cars, the legends of Bathurst. We'll be seeing sports cars, the 50s, 60s and 70s, and some of the real grassroots cars, the Formula Vs and Formula Fords that so many of our famous racing drivers cut their teeth on.
They're certainly worth a lot of money, but that doesn't mean that they're afraid to get them out there on the racetrack. Let's meet some of these drivers that we'll see on track today and learn a bit more about some of these amazing cars.
This is a 1966 GT350. It's a numbers matching car. I've owned the car for about a year and a half now. Imported it direct from the States. I've left it as a left-hand drive configuration. The original motor and original gearbox came with the car, but it's not wearing it today. We've got a 302 in there that's putting out around about 500 plus horsepower. But I had a GT3 RS, a very fast car, but this one gives passion. This one I really love to drive.
It's the real deal. It's a Williams FW07, chassis number 4, for those who care about these things. It was built in 1979, and it raced for the last half of 1979 very well, and then at the start of 1980, which is, of course, the World Championship season. So in 1980 in Argentina, he got pole position, fastest lap, and won the race in this very car. This car was then sold after it was used by Williams. They used it as a test car. AJ crashed it, testing tyres. He had a tyre blow on him. He crashed it into a fence, and they turned it into a display car. And then it sat in a museum for 30 years in Perth at the York Motor Museum.
It started in 1989. It was the first six-cylinder Nissan that Gibson Motorsport produced, and it was a car purpose-built for Group A, and really set the world on fire in those years. And it was really the forerunner to the GTR that came out in 1991. Certainly called it the Godzilla, and it was an unbelievable car, so it's got a lot of history. But this car is a simple little car. It's a light car. It's easy to drive. Got heaps of power, and it's a great car for us to run in the historic series. Glenn Seaton drove it, Jim Richards drove it, Mark Gave, of course, drove it. So yeah, it's had a lot of famous people drive that car.
Well, lots on track today, different categories, and we're going to explain them to you just quickly, starting with Formula Ford and Formula V.
Formula Ford was the class that a lot of our famous drivers cut their teeth on. Cars built between 69 and 83. Then there's Formula V in the same grid. Their cars built between 65 and 85.
We also have some regularity racing today.
In regularity, drivers try to meet a time they've nominated before the event. It's a bit of a black art because trying to get the times exactly the same lap after lap, not easy.
Some good open wheel action coming up in groups M and O.
Two classes here covering open wheelers and sports cars from the era that actually raced during that period of time from 1961 to 69.
Group C and A, and a lot of cars that people will recognise here.
That's right, these are heritage touring cars, the legends of Bathurst in groups of C and A eras. That's everything from Corollas to Commodores and Falcons, all of which used to race on the track at the same time.
Some amazing machinery showing up for groups Q and R.
Group Q and R sports and racing cars come from the 70s. Very, very fast cars. That's when they went to wings and slick tyres.
One of the biggest forms of historical racing is Group N.
Always a real crowd pleaser. Historic touring cars from pre-58 right up to 72, so you've got Mustangs and Chargers, all sorts of great cars people love.
And finally, we have the production sports cars of Group S.
These are production sports cars from the 50s, 60s and 70s, the kind of cars people used to buy and race at the weekend back in the early period of Australian motor racing.
Cars that I know are very close to John's heart. Okay, let's get into it. And so the engines roar to life at the Sydney Retro Fest. Formula Ford and Formula V rolling on out right now. It's brought to you by Penrite, a better class of oil, and they're heading around to the grid. And lots of variety on this grid at the moment with David Holland and Mark Lowing, a pair of Reynards that be going off the front row. We do mix the Formula Fords and Formula Vs. We see cars all the way up until 1989, and that famous name of Van Diemen as we get going. Good start from position number 2. That fast approach down towards turn 1, probably just about flat out from a standing start. Right on board with James Nagle, the approach to turn 1. It's a very fast left-hand corner, and open wall cars, you're going to make sure that you give each other a lot of room as we swing through the first corner.
All safely through the first corner as they come down that fast second straight down to turn 2.
Hard on the brakes, just to make sure that everybody's got a little bit of room. Open wheelers on cold tyres as well, always a dangerous part of the race.
And safely through turn 3, the swarm of Formula Fords coming over the crest.
Oh, brave move down towards turn 4, and that is Gary Watson proving that some of these older cars, John, can mix it with the newer ones, and it's still on at turn 5. He eventually takes second place away from our pole sitter.
Yes, but he's not going to have it all his own way. I'm sure that David Holland will be looking to get that place back, and indeed he's tightening right up on him now. And another move a bit further back in the field, but to no effect.
Mark Lowing, the race leader, his tyres screeching as they make their way around Corporate Hill for the first time. We are today racing on the Gardner circuit. It's tight stuff through the back parters. I've got a spinner as well down to the approach of turn 1, and it is in fact Mark Lowing. Started on the front row, facing the wrong way, down at the turn 8 hairpin. Does a good job to just get the car off the racing line. Always a dangerous moment.
Very, very nervous when you're facing the wrong way at turn 8. And Mark Lowing, you don't often see Mark Lowing make a mistake. Just shows you how much pressure he's under today.
Thin tyres, no aero. We were saying that it is cold tyres at the beginning of a race, and it was in fact quite a cold morning here in Sydney, so still waiting for that track temperature to really rise up, and these tyres will probably take 2 or 3 laps to really come up to temperature anyway.
And that means that Gary Watson inherits the lead of the race.
Certainly does. Let's have another look at how he did this. We missed the start of it, but it looks like maybe he's just pinched the rears on the entry.
Certainly does, and I'll tell you what, he was lucky he didn't go right back into the middle of the field coming through.
He's gone well and truly before the corner even began, as the battles continue right now. The battle at the front of the field is a good one. David Holland fighting away, and this is indeed for the lead of the race with Gary Watson. And once again, as we swing around through turns 6 and 7, Watson gets that lead back, and a good battle this one for first and second. Down the hill, back into turn 8, just covers that inside line nicely.
David Holland will press Gary Watson the whole way in this event.
Stephen Cromer now moves into third position as we fight the whole way back through this field.
And Elwyn Bickley in car 42 picks up a place. Elwyn driving the Elwyn Formula Ford, a car he manufactured himself.
This is how we got that move made once again, down towards turn 6, heavy braking part of the circuit. Set that move up nicely as we check out some of the Formula Vs further back in this field. And good battle for position going on right now. James Nagle, who we're riding on board with at the head of this race. Don Grieverson also in there. And car number 4, Michael Peters, towards the back in the Avanti.
Always really close racing in Formula V, just like it was in the day. One of the fastest cars out here at the moment is Nagle. We're riding with him at the moment as we come into turn 1.
How good is this? Riding on board, looking back at 2 separate chassis as well. On the outside will be Grieverson. On the inside will be Botten. Approaching the fastest part of the racetrack. Grieverson's going to be brave on the outside. He'll actually open up the door slightly though for Luke Botten, because it's a left-hander coming up next. It's a hairpin. Botten fancies his chances at picking up a couple of spots. Tight under brakes and 3 wide at turn 2.
But he doesn't make it. I thought he had that one done and finished.
The bravest under brakes down there was definitely Nagle, and he holds on to that spot in car 75. We're on the final lap of the race. We're looking at the Formula Vs further back in the pack, and Always tight racing, the slipstream racing continuing for decades in this category, and it's still on.
Meanwhile, back in the Formula Fords, Mark Lowing coming back through the pack after his earlier spin.
And good racing down there at turn 2 with Stephen Cromer and also Michael Meyer. We've got a couple of Reynards and an Elwin fighting their way through at the moment. The man who was the genius behind Elwin actually racing here today as well, Elwin Bickley.
Mark Lowing, once again, whoa, that was close on the brakes, wasn't it? Very close to the edge.
Very brave stuff down at turn 4, and he makes that move stick at the bottom of the hill on Michael Meyer. Now Meyer now has his mirrors full with Stephen Cromer. Good racing the whole way through this field, but at the front it's all Gary Watson at the moment, proving that some of these older cars can mix it with the late model Formula Fords as well. Final corner for your race leader. Onto the front straight comes Gary Watson.
In one of the oldest cars in the pack of Formula Fords here today, and a very big win to him.
This car built back in 1976. He's absolutely gapped the field. A good battle for the first 2 laps of the race lead, and it's your race winner, the first of the races today, going the way of Gary Watson. But the Formula Vs are not completely finished with their battle just yet as well. This is Tony Painter coming home for first. He's in the orange car. First time for the Formula Vs, and he's done so by an absolute mile. Also a good job from Mark Lowing to drive his way back up to third, but further battles going on back in the pack. James Nagle, the very fast approaching cars going past him, and Nagle doing a good job back there as well. The rest of the field coming across the finish line right now, and Luke Botten eventually would be beaten home by Nagle as well, but congratulations Gary Watson, doing a good job to gap the field after taking the lead on the second lap. Mark Lowing, though, after the spin, doing a good job to come back for third.
Fantastic fight back.
Checking out the highlights from the Formula Ford and Formula V, thanks to Penrite, their last race of the day, and it was Watson on the front row who got a great start. The man to watch down at turn 2 was Andrew McInnes with a big move up the inside, just locking those rears.
They were fighting for sheep stations in this last race, weren't they? Look at this now. We've got Lowing trying to go under McInnes, not quite getting away with it. Then on the straight, how close was that?
Watch how this finishes up. A wild spin as Lowing tags McInnes, and right up the back goes Watson and just about tags the back of that gearbox, leaving McInnes to take that win. Well, I said we've got some beautiful machinery getting around Sydney Motorsport Park. It's time to check out some of those cars thanks to Penrite today in the demonstration, and let's pick up the action with this beautiful Cooper.
Driven to 6th place in the 1957 British Grand Prix by Bob Gerard.
Powered by a Bristol motor. Here's an ex-Alan Jones car.
Beatrice Lola from 1985, not Alan's favourite car.
A year ahead, we go to 1986, and this is a very famous car. Benetton used to go 351 k's an hour at Monza. More F1 action right now. A Surtees that was driven by the likes of James Hunt, our own Tim Schenken, and a beautiful Matic.
Matic is R4, one of the most beautiful sports racing cars, one of our most significant racing cars in Australia, I believe.
And, of course, the most famous of Alan Jones cars, the 1980 World Championship winning Williams. Fantastic to see this car now based on the East Coast. Did spend a lot of time living in Fremantle in Western Australia, and it just wouldn't be an historic day without a couple of great Brabhams. Let's find out a bit more about these two beautiful cars.
This is the 67 Repco F1 car that Jack drove for the whole season, most accessible of all the Brabham racing cars. This was designed and built using a Formula 2 car as the original basis to make it smaller and lighter and more competitive, and that's why the engine has the exhausts in the middle rather than on the sides there, so the whole car is smaller. It weighed about 60 kilos less than the previous year's Brabham, and they cleaned up in 67. It was such a good car, very light, very torquey, very reliable. The worst result in the whole season was a 5th. They won a number of races and came a lot of seconds and things like that, but it was a totally reliable car, and they actually won the championship by more points in 67 than in 66, which is truly amazing. You know, it's a story that if you read it, you wouldn't believe it.
Brabham's amazing cars, and definitely Sir Jack Brabham was the sad loss to the Australian motorsport community this year. And we're at a circuit that honours his name. The full circuit here is named after Jack Brabham, but today we're running on the Gardner circuit as we get into now our Penrite regularity. It's racing against the clock, so we're not racing for track position, as you would say, but some great cars in there right now, and definitely a mix. And check out this big bad Stingray pulling the series horsepower out the straight line.
Of course, it's important to remember that it's not necessarily the fastest car that's going to win regularity. It's the driver who managed to match lap after lap to a time he's nominated before he went out. So the track conditions can change quite markedly between qualifying and practice and actually going out there to compete.
Very difficult to hit those lap times, especially when you don't have a lot of that available information to you, knowing what those lap times are. And this shot gives us a great look between turns 2 and 3 at Sydney Motorsport Park, but more so the amazing amounts of variety. You have Martini Porsches, we've got old Mustangs.
Yeah, that was Doug Barber in the Martini Porsche, brand new car for this meeting.
Nice Charger kicking on through, definitely a few Mustangs, but also Alfa Romeos in the mix. There goes a couple, BMW, so lots of nice European cars. Check out the Jag.
E-Type Jag, fabulous. And the big Falcon hardtop, then a 2-litre Alfa. How different can a car be? And a 240Z Datto.
So something Japanese, something European, some Australian, American stuff, and of course a Mini.
And then something really spectacular, the Lister Nobly. What a beautiful car that is, followed by something like a GTHO. And then you've got Rick Marks in the Shelby 350 GT. Rick, a well-known Sydney collector who's been racing in Group S for a number of years and has now just moved back into regularity at the end of his racing career.
Any car that Carroll Shelby has had his hands on is definitely a special piece of art. Let's check out onboard vision right now. We're riding with the Corvette of Hunwick and just gets alongside the Tirana. That's the approach to turn 4, down the hill, goes down a couple of gears, hits his marks nicely, trying to drive for those times that they nominate, which is also difficult because we've got the Capri fighting away with the Porsche and the Austin Healey as well. We've got a lot of traffic out there.
Yes, that Porsche there is being driven by Rex Broadbent. Now, he's been a real veteran, a real place getter at Targa Taz. In fact, he's been a winner of Classic Targa Tasmania on several occasions, driving Stan Adler's race car, back with Rick Marks in the Shelby.
Series of left-hand corners coming up, being chased by one of the Chargers right now, and personal favourite of mine, being a bit of a Mopar fan. Never quite reached the top step of Bathurst, did Dodge, but I think they can be pretty proud of their efforts.
So near, but so far. That's a beautiful looking car, Rich, isn't it?
Yeah, the GT350, I guess you could call it the little brother of the GT500.
Followed by a 3-litre Carrera Porsche, and behind him an MGC GT. That's Steve Perry in the tomato red MGC. That was like an MGB, but with a big 3-litre 6-cylinder engine up front.
Look at the travel in the gear stick for Rick Marks. So different to the kind of race cars we're used to seeing today with paddle shifts, and so much easier to drive than the old cars with all the available horsepower. Left hook a lot of these cars as well, especially the old American beasts like this one.
Joe Kalaja in the beautiful red Corvette. What a lovely car that is. And Rex Broadbent coming up the inside as he comes onto the straight. That's a very, very smart car. Normally raced in Group SC historic sports car racing. The E-Type Jag driver just saying, well, yeah, please go past on my left. Well, he was already past, I think.
That's Aaron Lewis doing the hand signals out the side of the window, and a very beautiful replica of the old Alan Moffat cars that we used to see running around the mountain at the beginning of the 70s. Great, great history in Australian motorsport, especially when you talk about Mount Panorama.
And Barry Bates in the Lister Nobly being followed by that Falcon GT again.
Rumble. Beautiful, isn't it, as it just takes off?
Sounds fantastic.
Speaking of the Rumble, we're talking about over 5 litres of V8 horsepower on board the Stingray. Final lap now for our regularity. Great way for drivers to get involved with historical racing if they don't want to exactly get out there to the wheel-to-wheel style combat.
That's right, but you can go pretty quick in regularity. You'll see these guys aren't hanging around. It's a great opportunity just to have a real good bang in your fast motor car without actually having to get into the combat door-to-door and wheel-to-wheel.
There goes that beautiful LX SS Tirana. And we check out the results. Peter Ireland was the man who got closest to his marks, and it's all European cars towards the top at the moment. The Alphas with a very good showing.
First and second to Alphas, BMW 635 and third.
Well, we're having a great day so far today at the Sydney Retro Speedfest. Stay with us. Plenty more great old cars coming up on the other side of this break. Hi everyone, welcome back to Sydney Motorsport Park for the Sydney Retro Speedfest. Some great gear celebrating some great eras in motorsport, and one particular era that we're going to turn our attention to right now is the famous era from the 60s and 70s, the Can-Am cars.
The name Lola, magic name in motor racing. How far does this car go back?
This one's 1969 at the height of the Can-Am, so this is when the big blocks ruled.
and this was Mark Donohue's car. The rear tyres are 18 inches wide and they cook after 3 or 4 laps. This has got over 800 horsepower and weighs 680 kilos. So before I get in it, it's 1,200 horsepower a tonne. So it is overpowered and under-winged, and it's quite a handful. This car is actually owned by Zach Brown, who is going to take over from Bernie Eccleston to run Formula One. This was his first car in his collection. He now owns a race of Formula One cars. I bought this from Zach, and if you've never heard of him, you'll hear from him very soon because he's taking over Formula One from Bernie.
Okay, let's grid them up. This is Group O and Formula Junior right now. We're racing for the Dawson Damer Trophy at the moment, and we're really talking about cars from the 60s right up to just about the 70s. No wings, no slick tyres, and it's going to be Carter and Simpson off the front row. Great mix of chassis out there with some Australian flavour as well. The likes of Elfins off the front row with Richard Carter, and that Elfin getting a great start as well. Just a 1.6 litre motor, but doing the job off the starting grid down towards turn 1. And again, we're talking about open wheel cars, so we want to make sure that we give each other a lot of room, John, at the approach towards turn 2, but that's a great start from Richard Carter.
Great start in the Australian-made Elfin there by Richard Carter, through a field that includes no less than 8 Brabhams.
So definitely lots of history out there. And also with Richard Carter, as we check out some of these moves just a second, we watch everybody flow through turn 2 and also turn 3, and it looked like I thought that maybe Weller was lining up a move, and he is down at the approach towards turn 4. That's clean stuff. He goes up the inside of Ed Holly. Holly here this weekend also in a Brabham, but just on that point, Richard Carter, a lot of experience racing in Europe, you were telling me.
Richard won the Drive to Europe contest back in the early 70s. Remember, that was an award for Formula Ford drivers, and it was supposed to be the thing that caught the new talent and sent them off, gave them a kickstart to get their career going in Europe. And Richard had the talent, and he was the winner. And he's the winner here today at this stage. He's certainly known a long way in front of everybody else.
Elfin cars based down in Melbourne back in the day, and that's where they were produced, and it's great to see them leading this field, a field that contains a great range of cars. Like I said, plenty of Brabhams, but we've also got some Lolas. We've also got, interestingly, an Eagle out there with a bit of an American flavour.
There's Weller looking to make a move at turn 1 on another of the Elfins, another of the Australian-built cars. Meanwhile, right out in front, Richard Carter stretches that lead, but Weller looks to make a big turn dive down the inside at turn 2.
Nice stuff, but I don't think he's quite got that car on the inside. Close racing though, and Simpson doing a good job to hang on for now, but we know that Weller's very good down the hill at the approach to turn 4. He'll be thinking that right now. Can he swing the car out to the right-hand side and make that move up the inside? He looks. Can he get up close enough? Not quite. Simpson is holding his line and swings around the outside. Good fight for second position at the moment as we now dive back into turn 5 and a series of left-handers coming up.
Poor Richard Carter's getting hardly any airtime at all because these guys are putting on such a great race. Meanwhile, car 25, Herb Neal out there in the Neal Ford, one of the guys out here this weekend who actually built this car in the period and still races it today.
Now that is very cool. We're talking about cars built before 1970 here, so to be building and owning cars and racing cars for that long is definitely an achievement to be proud of. Ryan Sorensen now in the Renmax as well. The BN2 model, 1.6 litre motor.
Another of the Australian-built racing cars in this field today.
I think that's what's probably most impressive about the racing that we're seeing in Group O and Formula Junior, thanks to Motorsport Connections, is some of these Australian-built cars. Speaking of, here's a Matic.
Keith Berryman in the Matic SR3. I think one of the most beautiful cars I've ever seen out on the track. It really is a lovely, lovely thing, and doesn't it go?
I love the innovation back in the 60s for where you might go putting rear view mirrors anywhere that you could find room, I guess, and even if that meant building a big stalk to stick it on up above the dashboard. This is, of course, the era before we invented wings and slick tyres to go racing in Grand Prix and sports car racing.
Well, the mirror probably isn't the most attractive feature of the SR3 Matic,
but it was definitely what you needed to get the job done. Checkered flag time at the ready. Richard Carter was never going to lose that race in the 1966 Elfin. He led that one comfortably from start to finish. Good racing for second position, and Stephen Weller would get the job done eventually from Keith Simpson. Great racing the whole way through this field, and good to see a lot of Brabham cars, a lot of Australian cars out there in Group O, and also the Formula Junior cars as well. Well, not only are there some famous cars in the pits here at Sydney Motorsport Park, there are some famous names, and one man in particular, the winner of the great race back in 1966, is here in the pits. It's Bob Holden.
Well, I started actual competing again with four wheels in 1949, and properly with motorsport rallies and things in 1953, 52 or 53. Then Cam started, I think, in late 53, and I've been with them ever since. We've got the Corolla, which I'm driving, which is actually, it's a good little car, a lot of history. It won the British Saloon Car Championship in 1987. And the Escorts, well, the white Escort, the other one, number 45, it was actually the last ever Escort to race at Bathurst. And went from 58th on the grid to 15th outright, I think, at the end of the day. 34 starts, I think. Probably about 30 finishes, which isn't a bad record. I was fortunate enough to win it outright in 66 in a Mini Cooper S. And we won many classes with the Escorts and Corollas and all the other funny things I've driven.
Man with a great history in Australian touring car racing as we check out some touring cars, the heritage touring cars, formerly known as Group C and Group A racing, the likes of those Jags, Toyotas, Sierras, Skylines, just about everything. But this is how they lined up at the first race, checking out their highlights, and a big lock-up with the two Bimmers going at it down towards turn 2. And we've also got those Sierras in there as well, one of which got a little bit sideways down towards the bottom of turn 6. Thankfully, no contact was made as everyone went fighting through. Ed Singleton, who is Mr. MPA himself, looked it around at turn 11. And we'll talk about Bob Holden's great cars, and here they are fighting for position going around Corporate Hill.
Bob there in the Corolla, chasing his own Escort just in front of him.
It was the HR31 Skyline taking another win here in Australia, and we're so used to seeing those cars winning races, or we certainly used to be, and that's Kerry McMahon driving that car as we get ready for a rolling start. In the grid, we'll see Kerry McMahon off the front row alongside Bill Pye, and a great mix of cars. First of the Group C cars will actually be a Mazda, the RX-7s, which we used to see back in the hands of the likes of Alan Moffat.
Weren't they fantastic things? And look at that, you've got Datsun, you've got Mustang, you've got BMW, and you've got that great big old Army Falcon. Remember the Army recruitment Falcon?
Very, very cool. Frank Binding's the man in that car, and he's looking to take the lead at turn 1. A brave move. They're almost 3 and 4 wide as they went flying through turn 1. But McMahon will hold on to the lead of the race at the moment at the approach towards turn 2. Bill Pye is in the ex-Dick Johnson number 17 Mustang, another Group C car going around the outside. It's a Group A car, I should say. Oh, and contact made in the middle of the field. We've got one facing the wrong way in a very dangerous position indeed. It was Lindsay Woolard, and I think...
the old Recar Commodore.
Yeah. Oh, big lock up down towards turn 4 as the battle for second is going on. Strong racing from the get-go, and the heritage touring cars putting on a show.
Well, touring cars of this era always put on great racing, and just because they're old doesn't mean they can't put on great racing today. Bill Pye hung out to dry there a bit after starting in second. He's back to 4th and really in danger now. In fact, he drops another spot as they head round the back of the circuit. The RX-7 coming up his inside.
Good racing. Frank Binding still wants the lead of this race. He'll have to take it from Kerry McMahon, and I think he's done so. Turn 7's the spot around Corporate Hill. We'll find out at the approach to 8 if he made that move stick, and he has.
And I take it all back to Bill Pye, got the place back, and now he's going for 3rd as they come down the inside to turn 8.
He cuts inside Cutler, and also some very 90s battling going on with an old Walkinshaw HRT car fighting with the ex-Glen Seaton Sierra. Here we go towards the end of the first lap. It's been a frantic one. Great racing in the heritage touring cars, and it looks like we're going to see car number 24 in the hands of Frank Binding, the XD Falcon from 1980, and lead us home for the first of what was very successful and exciting laps for the heritage touring cars. But watch the legs and the big Skyline go.
Doesn't that thing fly down the straight, and Binding has nothing he can do about it. Sometimes there is a substitution for cubic inches, and it's called a turbocharger.
Very, very true. It was the pre-Godzilla car, the HR31, built by Gibson Motorsport, factory Nissan backing, and didn't they have a few successful years in the sun? And Bill Pye now making it an all-forward fight for second.
Lunges down the inside. Is he going to make it stick? Binding comes up, doesn't give it away easily, but no. Bill Pye makes it second, makes it stick, and moves up to second.
Good racing from Binding, was aware, knew that Bill Pye was going to have a go down there at turn 2 as the RX-7 of John Douglas racing in Group C drops back a few spots. And there was the contact, the Sierra getting into the side of the Recar car, and that's what it all started. It's George Nittis making contact there in the 89 RS500 Sierra, and thankfully not too much damage in the middle of all that.
No, I think they've just about got away with that. Meanwhile, back at the lead, we've still got the Skyline in the lead.
Tough under brakes, isn't it? And very tight towards the back of the fight for the podium spots.
Norman Mogg, meanwhile, and the old Walkinshaw Commodore getting past the ex-Glen Seaton Sierra.
Absolutely loved watching these battles back in the day. Holden did claim the win in 1990. A year after we saw the 1989 victory of Dick Johnson, and a year before we saw Nissan take a win as well. And now we see Nissan and Ford fighting towards the front of the field. 18 and 17, your two leaders. McMahon, big lockup, wasn't it, for Pye?
Big brake lock-up by Bill Pye, yeah.
He's really pushing to try and hang on to the back of that Skyline because he knows how fast those Nissans are in a straight line.
And Frank Binding, who's using all the track and then a little bit more as they came onto the straight.
Here is that replay for second position, John, and just good awareness, wasn't it, to make sure that Pye was there, but Pye pushing so hard and locking that right front at the end of that lap.
Very good, clean racing, close but no contact there amongst the leaders, which is great to see.
Pye has taken the lead of the race, so new leader at the moment is Bill Pye. He's managed to get around the Skyline, but the Skyline is not going to go without a fight. Final lap of the race, through turn 3. Going to be careful with the power. Short shift into third gear. The ex-Scaife car against the ex-Johnson car. And down the hill they plunge towards turn 4. And McMahon takes the lead of the race back.
Bill Pye won't be too happy about that. He's a very competitive man and a very good driver. All over the back of the Skyline, over the back of the circuit.
This is good stuff. Group A racing didn't produce some fantastic cars. Tricky Dicky, he stuck it out with Ford, the blue oval badge, for a long time. And this is the beginning of Mark Scaife's career, the end of the 80s. We saw the Skylines really make their mark in Australian touring car racing before eventually the R32 Godzilla came into it, and eventually we had to ban them because they were just too quick.
And both of the guys getting the lead, getting out of the dirt as they come around the back of Corporate Hill. They are not backing off at all.
Really pushing. Last few corners of this race. The Skyline, after taking the win in the earlier race in the hands of Kerry McMahon, has been pushed the whole way. Further back we have these BMWs. They also had a few good years racing around towards the end of the 80s, even the beginning of the 90s in the hands of Tony Longhurst. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to struggle to beat the Skylines around here. The ex-winner of the Tui's 1000, well, not this car in particular, but they would eventually win them in the R32s. And the HR31 is the quickest car here today. And again, Kerry McMahon will be winning a second race here at the Sydney Retro Speedfest, and he does so ahead of Bill Pye, who put up a great fight. Good racing.
And then it was daylight back to Bill Cutner in the BMW M3. He could time it with an hourglass.
He had a lot of room back there eventually. He's coming home, chasing down the Toyotas, who are a lap down the pair of Bob Holden Toyotas. One a Corolla, one a Sprinter. And let's check out those results right now. Kerry McMahon putting up a great performance alongside Bill Pye. Really good racing. Cutler and Mogg would come home for third and fourth, but the first out of the Group C cars, it's John Douglas in that RX-7. Well, still plenty more action still to come here at Sydney Motorsport Park. Stay with us, it's the Sydney Retro Speedfest. Welcome back to Sydney Motorsport Park for the Sydney Speedfest, and just taking a small break in the racing to appreciate one car and reuniting him with its original driver.
Don Holland, Bathurst legend, out there in the old Max Wright Racing Tirana XU1. Great to see him out there having a bit of fun in his old car, waving to the adoring crowds as he headed past the checkered flag.
And it's now time to get back into something incredibly fast. Group Q and R cars heading out onto the racetrack. We do have some very nice ex-F1 cars like the Benetton that we're currently riding on board with, but I want to take you back to some earlier highlights. Watching the very back here, a very scary moment as Rod Carroll goes for a wild ride over the back of David Kent in the Chevron. Nasty crash this one, John, and thankfully both drivers getting out okay, but this is not what you want to see at historic events.
Well, David Kent certainly had a very close view of the underside of Rod Carroll's car, didn't he? Look at this again unfold. And I'll tell you what, it was just as well that roll bar was built to withstand a decent accident as well. Both guys getting out unharmed. How good was that?
The roll bar is definitely one thing that you never want to actually use in an open wheel car, but thankfully it did its job on that occasion. We're riding on board the ex-Gerhard Berger and Teo Fabi 1986 Benetton, a fantastic motor car. We check out how they're going to line up. Tom Tweedy's off the front row alongside Peter Lucas in the Rolt. We've got a mixture of all kinds of cars, especially some old F1 cars, old Indy cars. It's a real mixture. We drop the green flag and away we go, and they scramble for position. Open wheel cars, wings and slick tyres, very, very fast.
Great start by Les Wright from about fourth position there in the Benetton. Streaming through into second position as they come down the first through turn 1 into turn 2.
Heavy braking for turn 2, and like we're talking about that real mix as we see the Pye car. That is Peter Lucas, as you were alluding to earlier, and a real mixture of cars, but a lot of these cars celebrated through being the gold star standard of racing throughout the 80s as well, especially the Rolts.
Those Rolt RT4s are a terrific bit of kit, aren't they? They really were competitive in the day, and they're no less competitive now.
Oh, very sideways at the exit towards turn 4. Twitchy cars on cold tyres, and good racing for position as the Benetton gets the job done, and up the inside it goes of Sean Whelan.
Les right now takes off in hot pursuit of race leader Tom Tweedy, who's already done a bolter very early in the race in the Formula 5000 Chevron.
Strange mix of cars, isn't it? A 5-litre V8 leading a 1.5-litre turboed 4-cylinder car that put out ridiculous amounts of horsepower back in its day. The Benetton running at 5.5 bars of boost would turn out 1,300 horsepower. We're riding on board with it right now. This is a car that only weighs, remember, 548 kilos, so a ridiculous power to weight ratio with that Formula 1 car. Can he chase down our race leader?
What's incredible is how close the 1600cc Rolt RT4s were able to keep the Formula 1 car and the Formula 5000 cars in this race.
Both, especially the Rolts anyway, from the same era as that Benetton, racing throughout the mid-80s, but when you get to the straight line, that horsepower king, the Benetton, stretches away, as we said earlier, in the hands of the likes of Gerhard Berger and Teo Fabi. Let's just check out replay riding on the back of the Benetton up the inside, and there was that twitchy moment, very sideways stuff. That was Sean Whelan in the Rolt, getting very sideways at the approach to turn 5, and gave the Benetton enough room to take second position away.
Whether he liked it or not. And there comes the Rolt RT4 battle again with
Whelan and also Lucas.
Peter Lucas in the Pye sponsored car from the day. Remember, it had the Pye racing livery back in the day when this car was being raced. The only way you can have sponsorship on these cars is if it is the sponsorship that appeared on the car in the era.
I do like that set of rules. Benetton not so much a sponsor as much an owner, and that's why we've got the Benetton signage all over those cars. 4 wide, nearly down the front straight, very carefully picking his way through the traffic. Good racing. The Opel Wheelers try and find their way through some of the older sports cars that we have out on the track at the moment.
Justin McClintock there in car 21 being passed as they came into turn 1, and Justin's been racing that car for a long time too, and very, very handy in it he is.
Tom Tweedy, your race leader, car number 2, Formula 5000. What a great history those V8 engines had, running, I suppose, in Australia, also New Zealand, Tasman Series. Had his time in the sun.
We just saw him passing Steve Webb in the big Elfin, the big Banger Elfin sports car. Steve, of course, the father of Jono Webb from V8 Supercar fame.
Team Techno Autosport guys, and the battle's still continuing. This Pye Rolt is on for a great fight today. Whelan and Lucas still fighting away turn 2, and it's going to be Lucas on the outside. So much horsepower, you've got to be careful through there. Very easy to light the rear tyres. We don't have the current electronic aids that a lot of motorsport categories have.
That was a great move down the outside. I didn't think he'd make that stick.
It's a long way around at turn 2, but if you can pull it off, you get the inside at 3. So I suppose that is the advantage, and does eventually get that job done.
Also good driving with two guys who respect each other quite clearly. Big lock up from Les right, and that hands second place back to Peter Lucas in the little Rolt RT4.
How awkward did Formula 1 cars look back in the day? This is a car from 1986. Look how far the drivers' heads used to stick out of the cars. Look how far forward they used to sit. Let's check out the replay, locking up the tyres at the approach towards turn 6. Did a good job to just get off the brakes nice and early. We'll unfortunately have to pick up a bit of grass and a bit of gravel on those tyres, but it should take only a couple corners to get rid of that.
Yeah, you're sitting very close to the scene of the accident in one of those early Formula 1 cars, aren't you?
Unfortunately true, and the 80s was a daunting era in motorsport, which came off the back of a couple of very dangerous and fatal decades of racing. The 70s and 60s in Formula 1 was an extremely harrowing era of motorsport. But here is your race leader, Tom Tweedy, on your final lap now in the Groups R and Q races. This is a really nice sounding car, 5-litre V8s and open wheelers. What a great combination that was.
Talking about the others also ran. Tom Tweedy just said goodbye from the start, and that was that. Listen to that car. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Very much attacking the track at the moment as he comes down towards turn 8, a track with a corner with a lot of history in itself. That was the scene of the crime for Doohan and Crivier back in the day, the old Honda teammates running in the 500cc championship. And this venue, whilst not actually as old as, say, a Phillip Island, does have a lot of history already in the 2 or 3 decades that it's been in operation so far. And good to see that mixture of history today with the older cars. Tom Tweedy out of turn 11, on the Wayne Gardner named circuit anyway, down the hill to the checkered flag, and he's put together a very nice race in the 73 Chevron, takes that checkered flag, and he is your race winner. But that was exciting racing the whole way through the field.
Fantastic racing from second down, wasn't it? Tom Tweedy didn't back off, did he?
Les Wright will be disappointed on missing out on a podium, and Group Q&R Racing, all thanks to Penrite, a better class of oil, and the racing was definitely exciting with the open wheel action on slick tyres and with the big wings. And we'll be switching our attention now to the historic touring cars. They're rolling on out of the pit exit. Looking forward to seeing a very popular category, commonly known as also Group N, and these guys have been putting on some wild racing, checking out their earlier highlights and a big tank slapper in the Mustang and sliding off the road as well. Good job to hang on to that thing, John Harrison. And John, a big mix of cars, the Minis and Mustangs always putting on a big show.
Everything from a Hillman Imp and a Mini to Ford Galaxy 427. And then there's XU1s, Mazda Rotaries, the whole gamut of touring cars from the period out there. And that race was being run then by John Wright in an XU1 Tirana.
Riding on board the big Ford Galaxy. You can see it in the middle of the pack at the moment. It's an absolute beast. Probably enough steel in the bonnet of that thing to make about 5 of those Minis that we've got out there racing around today. Lots of history on the grid right now with John Wright and Wayne Rogerson lining up alongside each other. But what we love about the old historic touring cars is that mixture. And especially with a track like this one, around the back of the circuit, we can expect the Minis and the smaller cars to be quick. But it's the straights that we can see Mark Duquet in the big Ford Galaxy running away as we get into it. Historic touring cars thanks to Penrite. Bit of class of oil, and that Galaxy trying to find gaps that it just can't fit into as they nearly bang doors through turn 1.
Decay alongside Harrison there as they came through turn 1, and it looks like Decay's had the grunt off the start. No, Harrison makes it stick as they head down to turn 2, and of course the brakes aren't quite up to the task of stopping the Galaxy down there at turn 2, and he loses a spot or two. Hardly surprising, really.
You can imagine just how much weight is in that car, and momentum is the key. Pulling that thing up for a hard stop like we have down at turn 2, very difficult. That's where those smaller cars like the Minis manage to catch up. The Tirana now at the inside, should be able to brake later on the inside approach, and does so, makes that move stick. So Mark Duquet drops back another spot. Love the race number, 427. Very apt as the big Galaxy goes swinging around the back part of the circuit.
Seriously red interior in that car too, did you notice? There was Paul Tierney in 146, one of the many XU1s out here in Group N touring. And a number of the Mazda RX2s also one of the backbones of this class, but it's John Wright in the lead from Daniel Kennedy in the big yellow Falcon GT. Daniel Kennedy probably the youngest driver in this field today.
Around the hill we go, under the Sydney Motorsport Park sign. And this track now definitely synonymous with historic racing. We're seeing a lot of it today, but your race leader is trying to go on with his earlier efforts and trying to pull away a gap. Is John Wright in that LJ XU1 Tirana. He's got a handy lead. Wayne Rogerson right now, front row start for Wayne, but currently sitting in 3rd position, trying to chase down the guys around him.
John Harrison just behind him after that tank slapper in an earlier race. A couple of spots back now, Mark Decay. Big Chevy Camaro leads a little Escort twin cam, and then you've got Mustangs and XU1s all mixing it up together in the middle of the field, and Graham Russell in the green Mini.
There goes that big Camaro. Camaro had a big history of racing in Australia as well, especially when it was in the hands of Bob Jane. It's in the hands of Lex Pedersen today. That isn't exactly an ex-Jane car, but certainly when you think Camaro, you think bow tie back in the 70s, you have to think about Bob Jane and the success that he had in that car, running against the likes of Alan Moffat. Great era of motorsport. Is the Galaxy still fighting against another Ford this time?
Looks like Tim Grove in car 22 going up the inside of the Galaxy. Once again, the brake's not quite up to the job of stopping that block of flats as it came into turn 2.
We've got a Mazda RX2 coupe in behind them as well to really show you the kinds of cars that we have running around in the historic touring cars this weekend. We're riding on board the big Galaxy right now with the red trim. This gets passed by the red Mustang. Mustangs aren't small, but they look small in comparison to a big Galaxy.
Minute. They look like a Mini. There's Graham Russell again in the green Mini, one of the probably the leading Cooper S on this particular day. And he dives down the inside of Mark Lenstra's Ford Escort. And one of the XU1s, I think that's Paul Tierney just behind them, having a close look at the action ahead.
Escorts, Minis, Tiranas, they used to cut their teeth not only on tarmac back in the day, but they also made quite handy rally cars as well.
Just look at that Mini for a moment. Incredible to think that they came, I think it was 1st to 9th once at Bathurst. Just amazing results. But of course, the following year you had the first of the Falcon GTs, and it was all over Red Rover for small engine cars at Bathurst. And now the XU1 shows that there is no substitute for cubic inches as they head down the straight. Picks up 2 spots in the process.
This is a good race between the Escort and the Mini at the approach of turn 1. The Escort will hold on to that spot, but you can just see how much later these Minis can brake. They weigh absolutely nothing, and those small supercharged Cooper S motors do a good job getting out of the corners. It's in these long straights that they have a bit of a problem keeping up with some of the bigger cars. Good racing though. Here's the Galaxy still fighting away now with the Mazda RX-2. It's a long day at the office for the Ford Galaxy.
This is the second of the black RX-2s out there today. This one a four-door, down the inside he goes. Seems to be the story of Mark Piquet's day, doesn't it? Make a fantastic start and then see how long you can hold them out for.
He's a busy man on the steering wheel today, Mark Piquet, moving his hands around and even letting the wheel move through those gloves as he really has to pedal the big Ford Galaxy, the big 427 number on the door, and towards the top of the circuit right now. Turns 10 and 11. Here are the guys towards the front of the field though, and on the final lap.
There's been a lead change.
Yeah.
We've got
Kennedy now leading the race.
Kennedy leading right.
Oh, and Wright gets sideways at the exit of 3, drops a left rear into the dust. Very lucky not to have a lose there because there is that big concrete wall on the inside. He's pushing hard because he knows that he's on the last lap and he wants to chase down the race leader right now. And how often have we seen this? Ford v Holden, Tirana v Falcon GT. It's not at Bathurst.
Oh, right out, way out sideways there, but Dan Kennedy driving like a very mature man, a man who's been racing for years, and he can't have been because it'd be probably about 21, I think, if maybe less.
And lets the back end of the GT hang out. This is great stuff in the historic touring car racing. Only a handful of corners. Can the Tirana go around the outside? He's outbraked himself at turn 8, really pushing hard, but manages to keep the thing at least on the track.
Well, that's all he needed to do, but it's not going. And meanwhile, the Mustang behind them way out sideways as they came out of turn 8.
I think Harrison's thinking if these two get together, I might be able to jump and make a last-minute move, but I think Kennedy's going to hold on. He's got 1 or 2 corners to go, and the Tirana's not going to be able to outrun the big GT in a straight line. So this should be all car 63. Can the Tirana get a good exit? He does, but it's not going to be enough. That XU1 is going to try and pull out of the slipstream, but we know how quick these GTs are in a straight line. If he doesn't miss gears, he'll take the easiest of wins in the straight line.
Fantastic.
Man, what a race that was. John Wright pushed him the whole way.
He did. Fantastic race, but all power to Dan Kennedy for a terrific event in the GT Falcon. John Harrison in the Mustang and Rogerson in the RX-2. Terrific.
Duque would come home in 8th, and Penwright presenting a great race in the historic touring cars. Time to now move into production sports cars, our final race today, and it's all thanks to Exclusive Bodyworks. Some beautiful old cars from the 50s, 60s and 70s about to roll on out, and it's been an action-packed morning so far for these guys. Oh, you hate to see the 57 Corvette losing a wheel. Looks like the axle's broken at the diff, and hopefully leave too many scratches down the side of that car.
Might be the visit of Exclusive Bodyworks after it, I think, yeah.
To get that thing fixed up, disappointing, not what you want to see at the best of times. And at the front, it was a handicap race, so we saw a bit of a mix-up in the results.
Yes, the earlier handicap race was won by Rick Forster in the MG Midget, and of course, those races designed to give the guys in the slower cars a chance to actually be first to greet the checkered flag.
Chance to taste victory. This is how they line up, and plenty of Porsches out there at the moment. Plenty filling the front few rows of the grid, and also a couple of nice Mustangs, Austin Healey's, Alfa Romeos. Lots of beautiful classic machinery from years gone by, and away we go. The Mustang is slow to jump. That's Chad Parrish, missed the start slightly. The Alfa Romeo did a good job in missing him as we ride on board with Peter Eames in the Porsche. The approach to turn 1. Can we get all these cars down through what is a very fast part of the racetrack?
Peter Eames in a 3-litre Porsche Carrera being challenged there for his position by Brian Duffy in the green car alongside him. That was a 1959 Austin Healey. Meanwhile, I think Chad Parrish has got the Shelby 350 GT. Don't call it a Mustang to these blokes. They get very up close and very personally offended by that. And you and I both know it's a Mustang and a party frock, but it's a fabulous looking car. There's Brian Duffy, I mentioned earlier. He's just ahead of the green TR6 driven by Jeff Byrne. What a fantastic variety of 50s and 60s and 70s sports cars, but what a great lead to Andy Purvis in the yellow Carrera. Followed by Jeff Morgan, generally considered the man to beat in this class of racing.
And that's Peter Eames trying to go around the outside as we ride on board with him right now. Exciting racing. He's got Richard Watts up the inside. Who's going to be late to break? It's a left-hand corner, so he's going to be stuck on the outside with the Alfa Romeo in front of him.
That must have been awfully close to the door of Richard Watts' Carrera then. And he's behind, I think, Constantinides' Alfetta. Yes, indeed he is. And that's a great start for Constantinides in the 2-litre Alfa.
Aggressive stuff from Peter Eames on the opening lap. Plenty more Alfa Romeos back through here with the Austin Healey's and the midgets as well as we fly around turn 7, the approach to turn 8. This track falls away gracefully underneath the Sydney Motorsport Park bridge as we ride back on board with Eames.
Eames coming up behind Chad Parrish's Shelby 350. Beautiful looking car, and Peter Eames is looking a bit racy to try and get past that, because this is the part of the circuit where the Porsche will certainly have the handling advantage. And there we see Peter Jackson in a class-winning car, the 1959 Healey 3000. Beautifully prepared car. The closer you get to that car, the better it is. Peter Jackson pulls out to pass Richard Watts' Porsche and gets away with it too. Now he sets off after Constantinides in the Alfa. Meanwhile, Jeff Morgan getting much closer to Purvis at the sharp end of the race.
Yep, this is the battle for the lead. Carrera is going at it, and this should be interesting to watch how the two Porsches go toe-to-toe. It's an all-Porsche top 3 at the moment, and so much success over the years, haven't they, had Porsches all at racetracks all over the globe.
Certainly in this class of racing, the Porsches have been the car that's dominated the field for the last few years. And you've got a 3-litre car in the lead, followed by a 2.7. Meanwhile, back with Peter Eames, still trying to get past Chad Parrish. Peter Eames has a big problem here because the Chad Parrish car is much faster down the straight, and he's got the power over the handling at the back. Meanwhile, one of the little midgets, that's one of the Meyer midgets, comes screaming up the inside of Brian Duffy's Austin Healey 3000, and car 186, that'd be Gatto, I think, in the Alfetta. He comes through for the ride.
This is good racing for the minor placings.
Car 75, Brian Weston in the MG midget, Austin Healey Sprite. And meanwhile, there's a race lead change. It's Jeff Morgan nips down the inside of Andy Purvis as they come to turn 11 and onto the straight. It's Morgan in the lead. Now, can Purvis fight back? Can he do anything about Jeff Morgan?
Who's going to get the best exit out of turn 11, and down the hill we go. Now, Purvis does have a few more cubic centimetres in the tank to try and help him get home, but look at that thing in a straight line of Jeff Morgan's, despite the fact that it's actually smaller capacity motor. Manages to just pull out 1 or 2 more car lengths at the approach to turn 1. But this is not over just yet. A few more laps remaining in this great little battle for the front between 2 Porsches and a 3rd Porsche. Stan Atler in the background just watching this battle from afar. And check this out, 3 wide at the approach of turn 1. They've got to rush to sort this out because
Brian Duffy,
quick corner.
Brian Duffy in the green Austin Healey goes flying down the inside, and he managed to make that stick, but the Alfa comes fighting back, and they're chasing the little Austin Healey Sprite of Brian Weston. Into turn 2 they come, and it's going to be Colin Wilson-Brown in the number 11 Alfa who loses out in that little battle.
Great racing. This is further back in the pack from about positions 8 and 9 down, and fantastic stuff. And Wilson-Brown just deciding to play it easy for a few corners, but now he's getting a bit racy, looks up the inside at 4, sees half an opportunity, but decides to not go through with it.
Damien Meyer challenging Brian Duffy's Austin Healey as they come round the back of the circuit, and the big Healey certainly loses out to the little Healey on that occasion.
Further ahead, and this is the battle that we're talking about earlier between Eames and Parrish, and Parrish gets it all crossed up.
Whoa.
And just manages to hang on to it out in the grass. Eames will make that move stick, and that could have been a very nasty moment.
It certainly would have got Chad Parrish's attention in car 36, wouldn't it?
Man, that was a huge tank slapper. The Mustang now has the legs in a straight line to try and get back up to the back of Peter Eames' Porsche. That actually makes it Porsche 1, 2, 3, 4 now. And we've got a car off backwards, and maybe with big engine troubles.
Big engine trouble. Wes Dayton in the TR3, beautifully restored car, this TR3. He'll be very disappointed because that looks like a fairly major engine blow-up for him.
There's the smoke.
There's the smoke.
Through it. Gee, that's a big moment.
Yeah.
A fast part of the racetrack to have that. Oh, no! And backwards, in goes one of the Alfettas, and it's Daniel Gatto.
Gatto comes into heavy contact with that TR3, and that's a red flag. That's the end of that race for the afternoon, I'm afraid.
That was a nasty way to finish off the racing in the production sports cars. Thanks to Exclusive Bodyworks, Jeff Morgan will take the race win, and that actually means that Chad Parrish will be reinstated back into 4th position ahead of Peter Eames, as there was the red flag. But that brings to a close our racing today. John, fantastic action across the board.
It was a great weekend, really good racing across the board with all the classes. Some of my favourite cars were the sports cars out there, great touring car racing and some terrific open wheel action as well.
Yes, and thanks to the Historic Sports and Racing Car Association, as well as the Australian Racing Drivers Club for putting on a fantastic event. And there are shows like this that happen all around the country at racetracks, so do yourself a favour and go and see some old school racing. Thanks for joining us here at Sydney Motorsport Park. This has been the Retro Speedfest. We'll see you next time.
Coming up after the break, we look back on the supports action from the 2013 Bathurst 12 Hour, featuring the HQ Holdens and Geminis and improved production.